That exam date on the calendar is coming, and it doesn't care whether you start a class after Labor Day or whether you missed a week because of inclement weather. It looks upon your sweaty brow and laughs. And look, that pitiless laughter is hard enough to endure when you're on schedule, but if you're rolling into April and you're behind schedule, well, then it just feels like you might not survive this year. But I'm here to tell you that it is not, in fact, hopeless, and in this video, I want to share a couple of strategies for getting your students prepared for the exam if you're behind schedule. Well, hey there, I'm Steve Heimler, and I'm here to help new AP teachers build confidence in their ability to serve their students well. Now, the first thing I want to do is define what I mean by behind, because that may be different for everyone. In general, I think it's a good idea to have 2 to 4 weeks left for review before the national exam date, and in my better years, I have 4 weeks, and in my not so great years, I have 2, and in my worst years, I have only a couple of days. So when I say behind, that's what I mean. Now, if you're behind, then you have 2 major problems. Your students need to know the content of the course, and they need to practice the skills of the course. If they have all the content of the course, but have never written an essay, that's going to be a problem for them. On the other hand, if they're well-versed in the skills, but they only have content through half of Unit 7, then that's going to be equally problematic. Now, no judgment here whatsoever. I know what that's like, and it's such a stressful position to be in. But if that's where you are, let me give you some strategies for finishing well. First, content is king. Now, I've said this before, and I still believe it. If you have to choose between getting the content of the course into students' brains and having them practice their writing skills, I would go with content instead. Now, I'm going to qualify that in a moment, but let me explain. In my many years teaching these courses, the students of mine who have the best grasp on the content tend to do better on the exam, even if they struggle with the writing skills. So if you're behind, my advice is to shed all those great lesson plans and just focus on the content. And that could be through lecture, it could be through reading, and likely it's going to be through both. In fact, feel free to lean on me for this. My videos on the main channel are key to the CED, and that means I'm just giving the kids exactly what they need to know and not much more. And one more thing in terms of content, although this only applies really to AP World and AP US teachers, feel free to skimp on Unit 9. That unit is a relatively small percentage of what is going to be covered on the exam, and so even if you only get through Unit 8 and your students know everything before that, they're going to be fine. Now remember, I'm talking about an emergency situation here. Obviously, it's best to cover all the content, but if you can't, I think this is a good strategy. Okay, now the second thing to do is to make sure your students know at least the basics of the writing skills. The exam should not be the first time my students are seeing an SAQ or an LEQ or a DBQ. And even though I just said content is king, they still need to practice some of these skills. So in order to get the basics, again, feel free to lean on me. I've got videos explaining the rubrics and some videos where I go through the planning phase of DBQs and LEQs, and those can be extremely helpful to students. But one of the best ways to finish the year is to deliver to your students the content they need through the skills that they need to perform. For example, if they need to know about the effects of globalization, and they do, then give them a short lecture for context and then give them a DBQ on globalization. They can work with you and in groups to interpret the documents, compose theses, and then build evidence-based paragraphs. And in that way, they're getting both the content and the skills at the same time. Now, obviously, this situation is not ideal, but I think implementing these strategies are going to help you keep some modicum of sanity as the date of the exam approaches. So if you're a new teacher in the first few years, let me just remind you, none of us ever got this right in the beginning. It is not you. These courses are just tough to teach. Now, if you're going to be assigning DBQs or LEQs, then click right over here and watch my tips for how to grade them faster, because that's going to save you some sleepless nights as we get closer to the exam. Heimler out.